Steve,
Yeah.
what is one of the biggest changes at Riv
Oh.
between 1977 and 2022?
Come on, man, that's hard. One of the biggest changes. Wow. When we started, there were 12 of us, right? 12 of us from Iowa. Today, we have, in this city alone, we have 4 locations in which we do church. And so a lot of our ministries are focused on a location, whereas in the beginning days, everything was focused on one small group of people. And we were all the same age. We all had the same needs. And honestly, it was, looking back, it was quite easy to do ministry in that kind of environment as compared to what it would be like doing today.
Mm-hmm. So that sounds like a lot of there was structural changes that you've seen. You've seen a lot of or even just maybe, I don't know if relational changes is the right way to say it, because like you said, you're reaching college students. And that's or the same demographic, yeah.
Correct.
Do you feel what do you think has changed culturally? If you could name your top 3 of things that have changed culturally from that time till now in Riv's history that our church has had to adapt to, what would that be?
I think the biggest thing is our emphasis of who we were trying to reach was a very small segmented group of people, college students, and same age, same basic needs. It came from different cultures and all, but now very different.
In what ways?
Well, now our population ranges in age from,
little kids too.
We didn't have any. We had 3 families when we started, and 3 little babies. There were no need for kids ministries and any kind of thinking like that. Today, obviously, it's very different.
Yeah.
So cultural changes also. I don't even know where to start with that.
Yeah. Do you feel, okay, here's maybe a different way to approach that, is how have you seen, what are similar threads from when our church started to now when it comes to applications and implications of the gospel, and what are some different threads that have emerged over time?
Yeah, well, one thing, when we started, we weren't sure that we would be successful at a church actually being planted. And so when we thought about what do we do if we fail, I love Paul Dennerter has an answer to that. He was talking to one of the leadership guys back in Iowa where we came from. And, when you're concerned about what if we don't make it? What if we blow it? What if we fail? And the guy said, look, we're sending you out to reach people and love people with the love of Jesus Christ. And if God chooses to have a church started, that'd be great. If God chooses not to have one start there in East Lansing, how in the world can you call yourself a failure when you're loving people with the love of Christ?
That's good.
So today, clearly we are in a situation where we have large, exciting ministries. Many of them are in a challenge phase the last several years. And so we not only are maintaining things with new emphasis, we're also, it's a whole different thing about population that we're trying to reach.
Yeah. How do you, I appreciate the thread with love, because I think when you look at the different tactics of like evangelism or just outreach or whatever you want to call it, from like the 70s, moving into the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s or whatever, it's changed. You have like a heavy emphasis on apologetics and everything like that in like the 70s and 80s.
Right.
And kind of like a rise of prominence for that in like the 2000s, I guess. But it seems like there's like this undercurrent of like love. But I feel like the expression or how that's even applied in the Christian's life to people who are not Christians or Christ followers may have changed. I don't know. Like, have you seen that change over time?
How do you love people?
Yeah.
Has that
changed?
I don't think that's changed.
Yeah.
I think it's more difficult today to have gospel conversations, for instance. In the old days, I like what Tim Keller says in some of his lectures that he's given about how to reach the West again. He said back when his church in New York City started, it was similar in East Lansing at Michigan State University. Almost everyone had what he calls the Christian dots. Everybody knew there was a God. Everybody believed that there was a heaven. All the Christian dots. And so evangelism, or talking to people, simply had to do with helping people get the dots connected and then understand the person and work of Christ.
Yeah.
Today, people don't have the dots.
Yeah.
Especially young people. And I work with young people every day, and what I've discovered today is the best thing that I can do is become people's friends and just get to know them. And that may take weeks, months, it can take years to be friendly enough to have an understanding of relationship, to have a gospel conversation. So that's very different today.
Yeah. How prevalent was church planting in America, specifically in America, back when Riv was started? Or was your team like kind of like pioneers in that church planting movement?
It's very interesting from a historical perspective. During World War II, I was not a part of that, but during World War II, that's when Campus Crusade, Cru started. Young Life, I believe, Youth for Christ, the Navigators. And so after a lot of the troops were evangelized out in the battlefields and oceans and wherever they're fighting wars, they came back and started these massive parachurch organizations that were reaching, for the most part, younger people.
Yeah.
And off the heels of that came in the 60s and 70s what is known historically as the Jesus movement. A bunch of hippies becoming Christians and being baptized by the thousands in the ocean. And so the church that we were a part of in Ames, Iowa, was really a product of a lot of the things that were going on in the Jesus movement.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a case in point. Before I became a believer, I was 24 years old when I became a believer. I had some of the dots growing up, but it was Young Life college students who worked in the high school near where the university that I was going to there in Ames. They put the dots together for me. I became a believer. So one day, several weekends, our dorm floor had a sister dorm floor. There were guys and girl floors back in those days. And one of the events that we would do is go to church. Now, I was not yet a believer, but I can remember walking into a United Methodist church, great big, beautiful church, and all the pews were packed, and young people were sitting down every aisle with Bibles open in their lap and notebooks and pens. And there were so many people that people had to move and sit up on the
On the sides.
the stage
Yeah. Oh,
area
wow.
where the pastor was speaking from. And that was quite a time for God was just, it seemed like God, the Holy Spirit was moving. And so churches were being formed by a lot of young people.
Yeah.
And we were part of that.
Yeah.
Kind of
so cool.
crazy times.
That sounds
Very different than today.
Sure, yeah. I was actually going to ask you a question about like, so I've heard a similar, with Riv's history and Riv's story, like at our Hope venue when we first, built that building and we had the chapel there where now our student ministries, they run out of there, where, the sides, people are sitting on the sides, people are sitting up front on the stage. What I find very interesting about our church's history is that like it started with college students, but college students chose to stay over the years, or young families chose to stay over the years, which and then you end up getting this like snowball effect, right, where you kind of amass people. I guess how like. What I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about college students now, even young adults now. So many people living in a college town like East Lansing or the Greater Lansing area, whatever. It's very transient. Like, how did our initial church planting team like get people to stick around rather than look at moving out? Because I feel like that's a very big difference, in culture or demographics.
Yeah, that back in those days, our motto was it was very simple. We're going to reach the world for Christ. And the way we're going to do it is by reaching college students who will choose eventually to go out on church plants to other college locations all over the United States and then into other countries. And in that way, this youthful enthusiasm and all can be gathered up for the sake of the gospel, and we can move and plant churches. And so that idea captured a lot of hearts.
Wow. Yeah.
And then as people get older and they get married and they start having babies and oh my goodness, we're just a church mainly for young single people. And rightly so, a lot of these people wanted ministry for their marriage, wanted ministry for their children. Things began to change. And so that began a progression of many types of changes over the years.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
That's
But I think it was just capturing the enthusiasm of young people who are available to, after their degree, they could move somewhere and get a job and be on a church plant team.
Yeah, church planting is such it's a very fascinating thing for me, because like when I first came to Riv was like really my first exposure to it, and then like after being 3-4 years at Riv, I realized growing up I was part of a church plant church. The Korean church has a very funny relationship with church planting. It's like there's a running joke of like, there's Korean immigrant churches don't do church plants, they do church splits, and then whatever. But our family was part of this church plant that started in Farmington Hills, and I didn't realize it was a church plant until like 4 years into being at Riv and understanding what church planting was. So I feel like understanding history is very important. To understand like the future of either like a church or an organization or just even like a group of people or whatever, right? For you, like, what are your hopes for Riverview, like in the next, 10, 15, 20, 25 years? I know it's a big question. But like your hopes for the church? What would you love to see Riverview like become or do, or like what type of influence in our city like would you love to see?
the nature of where our culture is today, I would love to see our church continue to learn, and I think it's not an easy thing to learn how to reach youngers today. That would be a great hope of mine, because honestly, look at the scriptures, look at all the disciples, young men. Jesus was a young man when he was doing his ministry and then crucified and died. Christianity has always been about young people, which is very fascinating, especially in the book of Acts.
Yeah.
Goodness, you can trace the history there. It was crazy, full of young people, young leaders in very difficult situations. So that would always be something that I would wish we started that way. I think it's a big challenge today. I'm learning a lot myself personally about ways to be with young people, and eventually, after spending enough time, we have a great relationship to get into gospel conversation. That would be one thing, young people. Another thing, having multicultures involved in our churches somehow. I think that's, in the early days, we had a couple cultures for some time, for a number of years, and we were able to pull that off, though I will say that was one of the most difficult things that we ever did. Yeah. So I think that's always going to be difficult, especially in the times I think that we've lived today. It's just, it's not an easy thing. Right. But that would be wonderful. Yeah.
So youngers and more diverse, multicultural, transcultural. Yeah, I feel like moving a church in that direction, you need like that demographic. So in our case, we're trying to reach youngers and trying to grow in like multiculturalism or diversity or transcultural, whatever you want to call it. You need people within that demographic that you're trying to reach at the leadership table, right? Youngers, women,
sure.
People people of color.
Right.
I think.
Right. Just to mention young. In the early days, I was the oldest guy on the team, and I was 26 when I moved. Our two pastors were 21 and 23 or maybe 24.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So we were a very young, small church. Yeah. Yeah,
I think of Timothy in the Bible, and like Paul charging him to lead, his church. And I'm pretty sure Timothy was a young dude, based on some of the stuff that Paul was writing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Don't let anyone look down on you because of your age. But, and again, I think having people within that, at the leadership table, right? In our case, we want to have youngers and diverse backgrounds and women at the leadership table. For you, you mentioned that it's challenging. What do you personally see to be the obstacles for our church to overcome, to move in that direction? It's a big question, so you don't have to have a minute to answer.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not prepared to answer this one. Obstacles, wow, that's honestly one of the biggest obstacles probably for a lot of church people. It's just change.
Sure.
People don't like change. It's difficult to do something different than has been done before. It's difficult to be with people that I may not enjoy as much as this group that I've enjoyed for so long. Yeah. And we know each other so well, and we do things so easily and fun together. So change is a big deal, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Change, yes.
That's from your response.
Absolutely.
I'm hearing comfort. We like the spaces that we're in, especially, or the comfortable spaces that we're in, because who wants to get uncomfortable? Who wants to move into a place of discomfort?
What are some of those changes, or kind of maybe growing pains through those changes or blessings that came about from changing over the years?
One of the things that we thought we would never change would be we did not want to ever own a building because they're expensive, and who needs a building when there's all these buildings that are unused on Sunday morning? Let's just do church there. That became a great challenge then when you're trying to do family ministry, kids ministry. People don't feel safe with their kids in situations like that. So that was a big change. It turned out to be, when we finally bought some land and put that first building there and the wood structure part of the whole facility there, it was just an amazing blessing to have, because it caused us to reach out to an entire population that we were at before that point were not able to have influence with.
Yeah.
So that was fantastic. I think I've the last couple of years I've looked around at our elders meetings, and it's so exciting for me because we have 20-somethings and 30-somethings sitting in those meetings now with us. I'm not sure how many churches have young people sitting in those types of meetings, listening, having opportunity to help make decisions, and that's really exciting. I think some of the changes where we're involving women in women's ministries and having a greater influence over all the ladies that want to be involved in something like that is absolutely really a great thing.
Yeah.
How is it for you personally being able to sit in that space?
Yeah, one of the things I've picked up because I'm still trying to learn, especially when it comes to younger people. Some of the guys that are younger, like Frank and yourself, have talked about reaching youngers with a understanding of how the culture has impacted people in a negative way, and to learn how to come alongside people who are suffering, at least in their understanding, right? And be a part of eventually helping them understand more and more of how Christ can help solve their issues. And so I'm always keen, that's an old word, I'm keen to learn from the youngers and go out and I actually try things that I've heard them talk about. And it's fascinating, the conversations that I have. It's really kind of awesome.
There are many ways to view Jesus, right? Like just he's, Lord or Savior, or he's like he's the Son of God, and there's all these different ways, right? But we were talking about how sometimes one way to view Jesus that maybe was more prominent, like maybe 20, 30 years ago, was Jesus as like the lawyer of the universe. And like when you stand before the almighty righteous God, he is like the best lawyer, defense lawyer that you have, right? And how maybe that has shifted to Jesus as the doctor who heals you from your wounds, who takes care of you from your pain, and the church to be a place of healing rather than a place, where you learn to like defend the faith or whatever. That's again with the rise of apologetics.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's a fair direction of like?
Yeah, one of my concerns would be that our church doesn't know how to sit beside people who are still struggling in sins that seem great to the people who are sitting with them and trying to help them, and giving enough patience and understanding for these people to move toward Christ and to move toward a discipled lifestyle.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would hope that our church could be a place where broken people who are really struggling with sins that seem deep and grievous,
Yeah.
that we would be a patient, loving, kind community to love these people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would hope that no matter where we're at as a church, that people, we're not only, growing in Christ and learning to be discipled and all, and as a church family, helping one another do all that, but also my hope is that we would be a people on mission. I do all kinds of things to remind myself, even though I'm mostly retired as a pastor, though I am one of the pastors of the West Side venue. I teach theology class, so I'm very involved with those things. I do all kinds of things to remind myself. I set my alarm to 5:17 in the morning. And the reason, you might ask, why 5:17? Because 517 is the area code in which I have chosen to live, and I'm reaching people, and so that reminds me in the morning when I look at that dumb alarm and I don't want to get up, that's the reason I'm here. I'm not here for me, I'm here for others.
Right.
What is one of the biggest similarities or things that hasn't budged at Riv?
I'm so happy that in every Sunday service, we touch on the gospel. I'm so happy that in every Sunday service, we open the Word of God and we allow the Word to speak into our lives, and in ways where we know God better, and it may convict us of things to consider for our own personal walk with Christ. I'm so glad that those things have never changed.
Yeah.
And love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Those things we emphasize, and I'm so glad that we're 45 years later, we're still doing it.
I appreciate like the work that you and Pastor Paul and everyone else on the team and over like the years have done, because I genuinely think, I'm not even only speaking for myself, I can speak for thousands of people, that through Riverview, like through our church, like when I say Riverview, I mean like the people that make up the church, right? Like and how over 45 years people have passed on the baton to the next generation, and that's continued. I appreciate that, the dedication and the faithfulness to that. And like, because genuinely, like for my life, it has, like this church, our church has changed my life for like so much, in so many different ways, and for the better, of course, right? But it's interesting, like it's done it in a way where I love Riverview, but my allegiance is at the end of the day always going to be to Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, not to make a separation between the two in that sense, but like, and like I personally love that I've become that type of Christ follower where like I learned to love the Lord, and also like have learned to love like the local church, because that's always a struggle for people, and it's been a struggle for me too. But yeah, all that to say, like, just appreciate like the work that you've done and so many other people have done to create this space for so many people.
Young, one of the things that I really appreciate about you is it truly is the fact you're in a somewhat of a cross-cultural situation being in Riverview. And seeing you and your wife navigate through all that over the years and stick with it and be a part of it has taught me a great deal. It's encouraged me. It's I want to be your cheerleader. I'm so excited that you are, well, you're one of the pastors. Almost. Oh, right, not yet.
No, Lord willing, I don't know. Yeah, that's always a... Yeah.
And, you know, it's an awesome thing. And just that part of it. And also just to say, bro, I love your teaching.
Oh, wow.
I love that. I love listening to your stuff, because I'm never able to be at the MSU venue. So I always have to click on whenever you teach, watch your teaching, and I just love learning from you. So thank you very much.
That means a lot coming from you, for real.